Tanse, Oki, hello, and welcome to Ancestral Science. We are a group of Indigenous scientists, educators, and artists who want to further explore and share the depth of science within Indigenous knowledges and bring together global Indigenous sciences for sustainability and relationality. Our ancestors had complex and diverse relationships with science for generations so that they could thrive within the circle of life and alongside the land. We continue to learn from these ancestors who are not only humans, but trees, animals, plants, and the cosmos, who continuously gift us knowledge so that we can all work together towards a more relational and sustainable world for the next 7 generations. My name is Corey. My mother's ancestors are Cree Métis from Big Prairie, which is up in northern Alberta. My father's ancestors are Polish-Ukrainian. So my mixed heritage is really reflected in this ongoing exploration of relational science through multiple experiences, senses, and worldviews. Each episode has unique Indigenous science merch, so see the show notes for that link or go to relationalsciencecircle.com/shop. And all of those profits go towards following protocols of tobacco and honoraria for elders and knowledge keepers that we get to speak to on this podcast, as well as towards editing. So thank you to the talented Emil Starlight for helping with that. And all of this just keeps this podcast going. And if you learn something from any of these episodes, which I'm sure you're going to, and you're probably going to want to share it and talk about it with your friends, because that's what we do. We just ask you to please respect protocols. And what this means here is, quote, cite your resources. So any of the things that you learn here today, connect that with the elder or the knowledge keeper that it came from, as well as the community and the lands that they're from. And this just allows for that knowledge to continue to stay with that elder and to stay in community. So with that, hi, and I hope you enjoy. Are you ready for Ancestral Science Podcast first 2-part episode? Yeah. So I sat down and chatted with Siksika Astrophysicist ROB CARDINAL. We chatted about holistic science, quantum woo-woo. Yeah, that's a phrase. I love it. I'm going to use it more regularly. I don't know in what circumstances, but I'm going to try. Frequencies and spirit within quantum and the emission absorption spectra. Everything is a reflection. Rocks never make mistakes. And of course, the one electron universe. So even after all of this, for some reason, I'm not surprised, but we never even got a chance to ask, what is science to you? Which is how we start every episode. And not only that, the whole conversation actually was going to revolve around Indigenous ways of knowing and AI, which we never got to either. So hence why we need a 2-part episode. One more thing, my apologies. We're still working out some tech issues and everything here. Also, being new at this, we're all here to make some mistakes, and that's okay. There actually was a second half of this episode that was all good. We had great conversation and was so into it that I forgot to click record. It happens that happened here. But thank you, Rob, for not being angry and still persevere and moving on and recording it again. But as we say, it was not meant to be, and what was recorded was supposed to be recorded. So enough waiting. Here we go. I'd like to introduce Siksika Astrophysicist ROB CARDINAL. Hey, Rob.
Okay, Corey, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Fantastic today. Thank you. Yeah.
Awesome. Would you like to introduce yourself however you'd like in your own way?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Corey. Because it's a beautiful day. Niminatoto Siksika. I'm from Siksika. My name is ROB CARDINAL in the West here. And in our language, I'm known as Star Chief, Kakatosina. Natanako Kakatosina. And I'm super honored and, endowed with some responsibility with that name. And that is really top of mind. And so I love to just say it and just remember that this is what's happening.
It's a name that's very fitting, I think.
Well, now that we can take our names back, our traditional names, Following my maternal grandmother's family side, I would be Good Eagle. So Star Chief Good Eagle sounds extremely contrived to me. It sounds like something out of a movie. It's
Embrace
ridiculous.
it. Embrace
I
it.
do. I was just saying Blackfoot. It's good. So yeah. How are you doing? What are we doing? We're going to talk about ancestral science.
We're going to talk about ancestral science. How's that?
Oh, that's just fantastic.
Took a long time to get that name. It's
that's a beautiful. It's really nice.
It was Juan Carlos and I trying to figure that out and thinking about us as messengers, really, and connectors of different knowledges, not just between ourselves and our human ancestors, but also learning from the ancestors of the land, of the stars, as you've been talking about, as well as the trees and the animals and everything. So that's just learning from all that is around us. Learning science about all that is around us. So
I know some of the simplest things have taught me, some really deep things, and they've been natural things. Stones in particular have led my thinking in ways that have brought me to clearer understanding, like literally just thinking about stones and really what they mean and how they got there and all that kind of stuff. And then I'm so fond of stones. I got them all around me and on my deck, and I just pick up stones all over the place.
That's a lot of people don't think of stones as something that is animate or with spirit, never mind being an ancestor. So it's
well, before I ever had that kind of where there's a mindset these are alive or not. I always talk, as a child, like everything's alive, right? Like in your cartoons, in your books, everything's alive, has a happy face, and and so, and I would have conversations with stuff, and my cat, my dog, and the horses. I love talking to the horses.
Yeah.
They would listen for hours. They were awesome. But honestly, and so stones, I've always had an affinity ever since I was young, always picking them up and having them and holding them and not really knowing why. And just, they're just always, I've felt friendly. I always felt like they're really friendly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is kind of weird because they're hard and scary if they're falling on you.
And it's something that's very familiar with a lot of kids play with stones or collect stones or.
Well, they're just so fascinating. Yeah. Like they're so hard and permanent. And, they're really the most hardest permanent thing in our natural world that we see around us. And that's fascinating. The age, I think it's really the timeline, the time scale that I'm holding is result of like this, and of course I didn't know anything about the carbon cycle or plate tectonics or anything, but just I knew it was old. I knew it was like it's old as the hills or older than hills,
Older than the hills, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Little did I know that it, some of it predated the sun or itself,
Getting ahead of ourselves, which I appreciate, which I love. We'll get there.
So that was an aside on my friendly
stones.
Friendly stones.
That can be as we go through this. We'll continue to think about the title. Oh, touchstone. I'm going to write down friendly stone. I like it. So I was trying to think about when we first met, and I feel like it was. I phoned you in the middle of COVID, and I remember you talked to me for like an hour.
Didn't we? We had met pre-COVID. I'm sure we had.
I don't know. Maybe I think we've met, but I don't think we really had a conversation.
So we didn't have the advisory. Yeah, I guess the advisory circle wasn't before COVID. Okay, is that ever bizarre?
Yeah,
it just feels like
it seems like it's been like 5 years, but it has not.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic.
Yeah, but
I honestly don't remember the first. Yeah, you phoned me out of nowhere, and we
phoned you out of nowhere, and then I asked you if you could be on the advisory circle. For those who are unaware, Rob Cardinal is part of the advisory circle, the Indigenous Advisory Circle at the Telsbrook Science Center in Calgary, Alberta, and has been a part of that, I guess, since I've been there, because that's one of the first things I did since 2020. I think it was like summer 2020. We started.
Okay, I'll take your word for it.
Rob out of nowhere. Hey, you want to be a part of this? And then continue to have an amazing conversation. And here we are.
I know. And you got like this PhD in Indigenous mathematics, and mathematics is the most fascinating thing to me, right up there with quantum field theory. But mathematics is the bare bones of it all. And you and I have never really sat down and and we've had many opportunities, I think, but we've never sat down and had that philosophical sort of talk about, do we discover it? Do we find it? Do we invent it? All those kind of ideas. I've always been wanting to pick your brain about them. But I'll have to start a podcast.
I was going to say,
you on as a guest.
maybe this will be part 1, and then part 2 we'll just flip it, and then you can interview me. How's that?
All right.
Okay, done. Stay tuned, everyone, for part 2, and then everything will be backwards.
The anti-supersymmetric mirror version of this.
Yeah, there you go. Write that down too. So, as you were saying, as being a part of not just Spark at Science Center, but also a part of Indigenous Team and a lot of different organizations. I was going to ask, what's the coolest thing or the coolest thing
you've
done, or
the coolest thing about meeting you is you, honestly, that you're so eager to have, these great events and great times, and they're really meaningful. They're all really, and so I was thrilled to meet you and be able to walk along together on some of these, and they've been incredible. Teepees and telescopes when we went to Wilfred Buck, by Winnipeg, and that was just mind blowing.
We were talking to Juan Carlos Chavez, I think 2 episodes ago,
right.
and
he was
actually
there
talking about teepees and telescopes in Kananaskis, which was the second time we did teepees and telescopes together. But the time before that, we were outside of Winnipeg, and I think we had very late nights looking at the stars and having conversations in the pitch black with people. I remember coming up to me the next day and being like, "Oh, it was a great conversation." I'm like, "I don't know." Your voice sounds really familiar.
Exactly. That is an interesting. I mean, just that alone was interesting about it. That you knew people by their voice, but not by the sight.
Yeah,
which is is completely different than normal.
Yeah.
Anyway,
what about that?
But those, so it was, some of the pictures, the talk, and those rattles, the Siksika that we received was just that went all the way back to my first, recurring nightmare as a child, and it almost made sense of it. It didn't almost, it completely made sense of it in a way that of course I had no inkling of for my entire life until I became involved with my community, with my indigeneity, and with my spirituality, and it just brought it all so neatly together. We were gifted these beautiful rattles by Wilfred Buck, and to describe them, they're half black and half white, and what I forget what's the Cree name for them. Siksika. I think I remember him telling us the name, the story of how they were named and what their meaning was, and it was related to the word Siksika is, and I'm not a Cree, linguist at all, but that he said that it came from the spring breakup, that the sound that the ice made during the spring breakup, yeah, and so that connection was important.
That, and I remember that part is significant for me because that's something, I grew up, I was born up north by the Peace River up north. And that's something I vividly remember as a very small child, not just, waking up in seemingly the middle of the night watching the Northern Lights, but that pitch black, that sound of giant ice just hitting one another. And there's nothing like it.
there's nothing like it, and you can't describe it. You cannot do it justice.
Especially when it's so cold in that. Yeah.
Yeah. It is phenomenally. It feels like an ancient sound, you know. And then that's again the time that epic time is something that's always really, you know, fascinated me. So, and anyway, but the rattles themselves, you know, so in my recurring dream, you know, I was terrified of them. I had this dream, and honestly, from the time I was 3 or could even speak, I would describe this dream to my mom that these, and I think I called them ghosts, but they were dancing in front of me, and they look exactly like the rattles.
Eyes, and they have
they have eyes and they have horns. Yeah, and they have no mouth. Well, they have that circle. At any rate, there was 2 of them always in my dream, and they were always dancing in front of my face. And there was there was drumming, and there was singing, but I didn't know what that was. Right? I didn't even I hadn't experienced that at all at that time. But now, you know, now that I've experienced tribal singing and drumming and ceremonial, that's exactly what it was. And so, you know, I would describe it to my mom, and she never really had anything to say about it. She would just comfort me and whatnot, because there were several recurring dreams. And so, you know, now, having spent time with elders, you know, I know that these are power dreams, you know, and they're, you know, gifts, and you'll know a power dream because you'll remember it forever. And those ones that you do remember forever are power dreams. And if you haven't made sense yet of it, it's amazing. I've had this happen to me several times now, where it just, oh my gosh, this is it. This is exactly what that dream was about. But I don't know why I would be shown or anything. I don't know. I just know that it signified a significant milestone in my life. It certainly did, there at Teepees and Telescopes in the east, smack dab in the middle of Turtle Island. We were geologically and physically at the center of Turtle Island.
How about that?
Yeah. You know, within tens of kilometers, honestly.
Yeah. So you're talking about your you know, this deep connection to your culture and your spirituality, but you're also kind of a scientist with a couple major comets, right? Named after you.
Right. Yeah.
So how do you connect what is your...
okay. Well,
worlds together.
Yeah. It's very strange how I came to science. It was never my dream to be a scientist. I wasn't one of those guys out there making like a telescope out of a ship's portal when I was 12, you know. I mean, science, all such, no, like the diehard, you know, born astronomers were doing that. But, you know, I just like to go to the science center and, you know, look at pictures of stuff. But any science, it was literally any science. It was all, you know, medical or biological or, you know, weather, loved weather and all that. So, and it was just, to me, what was so fascinating was that I could know something that would tell me something else. You know, I could know something and draw, you know, conclusions that would amaze people who didn't know the other, you know, didn't know that. And so, you know, as a kid, you know, you like magicians and you like magic tricks and you like things that make you look, you know, cool and smart. And that's what science was to me. It was cool and smart. And it did nifty. Yeah, it was cool and smart, and it did nifty things like make my Lego motors go and stuff like that. I actually destroyed Lego to pull the motors out to make my own first robots.
Of course you did. That doesn't surprise me at all.
So so I don't know why, but that was my early thinking of science, and I just liked any kind of natural knowledge that you know. And then of course it was this, you know, I was born in '69, so all through the '70s was the launches to the moon. And so I was fascinated with anything to do with space, and the fiery power watching those launches coming out the bottom of those rockets. There's this movie called Koyaanisqatsi the Hopi word for life out of balance, and it's a fantastic. If you haven't, I'm sure
Put it in the show notes.
Oh my gosh, you got to see it. Anyway, they do this cinematic shot of a rocket engine, like really close up in it, and just that power. So I remember drawing that. I would draw those things, and I would make the sounds, and I would just imagine the sheer force of energy that was going through these engines and stuff. That was science to me. It was just cool, and it was powerful.
How many astronomers and scientists came out of that time?
Oh, of course. I mean, it absolutely
inspired so many people, I'm sure.
So many, and not just scientists, but engineers, doctors, like just anyone, just who's curious to know, and to see these people have the guts to put their life on the line to go, out there, and then that, and I, of course, I was being raised in, well, this was Edmonton when I was really young, and not part of my nation, not part of my language group, none of my family. That was all replaced with, settler city living and school and whatnot. And talk about immersion, right? Immersion school, right? So, but I was always suspicious of things, not suspicious that they were there to harm me, but suspicious that there might be something that they could teach me that would help me. And that's how I looked at things. And if I couldn't figure out how something worked, it bothered me. It really bothered me. Like it would, until it would honestly later in life, it caused me depression. If I couldn't make it work in my head that there, and I've honestly had to come up with psychological techniques to calm that down. So, because I will spiral into a depression just because I can't figure out why, Gödel's incompleteness theorem actually proves incompleteness or something like that.
To this day, you spiral out of.
No, I have. I've learned the skill. I mean, I had to learn it in university when I was confronted with number theory, and and some one of my courses honestly sent me into one of those month-long spirals, and it was black and white nightmare of math. But it was like an initiation that I had to go through, and I had to understand pi is really what I was after, and Euler's identity, e to the I pi plus 1 equals 0. These 5 fundamental constants, the most common ones, all tied up in this nifty little bundle. And it's just an identity. Nobody makes a big deal out of it. It's just one, whatever.
Yeah, all good.
Yeah. Anything over itself is one. Even the most incredible truth in the universe divided by itself is one.
Is one. So how did you get into connecting science then with your culture?
Well, I mean, honestly, that came about just supernaturally. Imagine that. I ended up not finishing high school. Okay, I had some real rough patch from the colonization, detriments, and they really sprung up when I was 15. Hit the streets in Edmonton, and hanging out with the whole story, the usual kid off the rails, and very angry, very self-destructive, and ended up getting kicked out of high school, getting kicked out of my home. So spent minor amounts of time on the streets, couch surfing and whatnot, and very obliterated on drugs and booze. And so I ended up getting some treatment. When I was 19, I went to Poundmaker's Lodge, and that was my first. Well, not quite. When I was 15, I did go to a pipe ceremony up north with a very fascinating man named Joe Couture, who my mom followed and went to see. And he did a pipe ceremony that connected me. So since you've asked this question, you led me, unbeknownst to myself, to literally the connection. Okay, so what happened there was I was 15. I was pretty much off the rails by this time, but my mom still she, as kind of a last ditch attempt, she wanted to take me up to see Joe. And it was the first time I had been, an actual participant in ceremony. I'd been around them. I knew what they were. I'd been around lots of lodges and pipes and whatnot, but not as a participant. I was a child, right? I was just in the background. So this was the first time that I was an actual participant and client of the lodge. And so, it was in a teepee on the shores of Calling Lake on a beautiful spring day. And I remember the lodgeman, Joe Stone, standing over me with the pipe. And there was 3 other people. So we were in the cardinal points in the lodge. It was a sunny day. And as he stood over me, I felt he was praying, I think in Cree, and I felt a bolt of energy. Is the easiest, simplest way to describe it, but it was much more than that. But I felt something pass through me. I couldn't tell whether it went through the ground, up or down. It was like lightning going through you, right? It's sort of, but not in a painful flash like that. But there was definitely a bolt of something,
like energy.
And a bolt of energy, seriously. Yeah. And at the same, so as he was moving on to the next person, he stood over us with the pipe and prayed and would move on. And he had begun the ceremony before we had been there, and he had sweat with the pipe and whatnot. But, as he moved on to the next person, I remember the shadow of a bird. It was clearly an eagle cross in front of the sun over the lodge. And my question when I had gone there was, what, I'd heard that Indians had these spirit guides, by this time, this is long after I'd read Layman Deer, Seeker of Visions, which we're going to talk about again.
Yeah.
But this is what I wanted to know. I mean, number 1, is it true? And number 2, what's mine? Right. And
spirit animal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was my question. It was basically, who am I? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, after the feast and whatnot, he takes you aside and tells you what he got out of it. And he said, well, you're born under the eagle. And he said, I've never seen anyone born under the eagle like you. He said, so that's that part, he said. And my mom had gifted me a hand drum and 2 eagle feathers, actually, in honor of me participating in this. And he pointed at those things, and he said, but this is what you came for. He didn't elaborate much. He did say, take good care of them. And he did say, they will treat you well. But there was no any deeper interpretation into this is what you came for. Because in my mind, my entire intention and attention were on this spirit, guide thing.
Yeah.
And so that didn't make sense until much later as well. And I hope we do get to that part. But it's a ways to get there, because it's many years later. But that was my connection. And why was that my connection? Because my mom, it was a psychologist. She was widely read. The entire house was littered in books, and she would read all kinds of stuff. And so I'd seen all kinds of crazy philosophy books, and crystal power and Wicca and everything. And it was all cool. It was all like creepy story cool, right? But I didn't buy any of it. I was, this is all bunk, Mom. Like, seriously, how can you believe any of this? Seriously. And we would have long philosophical conversations. And I'm so grateful to her for putting up with my incessant philosophizing. And
philosophizing.
I didn't know what to call it. I was just trying to make it make sense, because it bothered me, right? It bothered me that people could believe in something that wasn't true. That just bothered me. That really bothered me, especially when it affects other people, and so on and so forth. So I really was this hardcore physicist, born like just I had to know the answer, and it had to be concrete, and I didn't want any wishy-washy nothing. It all had to make sense, and that was really so after. So then at 12, this is sort of pre the pipe ceremony, but I knew that my sole intention in life was to understand the fabric of reality, and the absolute base, most fundamental fabric of reality and I wasn't going to be happy until I did. And I remember coming up with that after reading Lame Deer's Seeker of Visions about John Fire Lame Deer's Lakota Sioux, amazing person whose story is well worth reading, and certainly intrigued me to no end. And the Dancing Wu Lee Masters, yes, that classic of the 80s. Lots of quantum woo woo in there. Let me tell you,
quantum woo woo,
right? So stuff that is people have like hung a lot of weirdness around quantum mechanics, and they like macrame, and they just hang stuff on it. It's like, because quantum predicts this weird thing or acts in this weird way, then I can just hang any kind of weird stuff on it, and it'll just, it's got to be the answer, right? And so there's all kinds of woo on it, and a pop sci book on it in the 80s was, of course, ripe for doing that, but it did present the core, I guess, tenets of the new physics. And of course, those fascinated me easily as much as the visionary part of Lame Deer. So for me, I wanted to experience both. I wanted to understand quantum, as well as I could. And I wanted to understand this visionary thing, this visionary process, and this visionary relationship that I should have, if Lame Deer was right at all, that I should have access to.
Yeah.
Yes. So that was really, and that was when I was 12 or 13, and then, so by the time I was 15, I was a raging atheist, and I could have been Richard Dawkins first. I mean, I seriously, and I wouldn't put up with any nonsense. And so, my mom had to put up with me, and she was quite fond of some nonsense, and she certainly was fond of Joe Couture and a lot of traditional Indigenous ceremony stuff, because she spent most of her professional life working with Indigenous communities in a healing capacity. So she had a deep fund. She was a deeply spiritual woman, and really well educated and strong. Very, very strong spirit. The fact that somebody that I could look up to so much bought into so much stuff that I couldn't buy into was a problem. It was one of those problems that I couldn't solve. It was one of those ones that could drive me to depression.
So it was like your brain was like the rattle. So you had like half of wanting, did you like this? Where I'm going with? Half of it was, I need to understand, figure out the answer to everything. The other half was like, okay, I need to kind of surrender that in a way.
Absolutely. And that's a terrifying prospect.
With the journey of wherever that may take me, and whatever knowledge is kind of gifted at me along the way.
Yeah, you put it very beautifully. And I've never really but it makes a lot of sense. The sense that I've made of the rattles is that I think for the first 18 months, nobody knows where I was. I was a ward of the government, but I came with a note. And the note was poorly written. The note was poorly written by somebody who really cared about me and wanted the person who got me to know a few things.
Do you want to back up a bit on what kind of, for listeners that may not know what that means?
That I was adopted. So I was taken as a ward of the government, shortly after birth, because my birth mother could not, didn't have a home and couldn't provide what they thought was, a proper life. Although she already had 2 children, she didn't have a home. And, other family members wanted to take me, but they also had, 8 or 9 of their own at the time and couldn't, and it just didn't work out. And I went through the cracks and out I went. And so I, for 18 months was, somewhere, and we don't know where. I was well fed. I guess I came through pretty chubby.
the chubby baby.
But I was definitely broken. I cried. All I did was cry for nonstop for like 2 or 3 years. And I had these nightmares. And so I actually kind of have this thinking that I may have been, that somebody may have done ceremony over me or with me or around me. Maybe protection, maybe, all of our ceremonies now, as I know them and experience them, have all to do with healing and protection. And, so I don't know, but the rattles were literally exactly like the ones we received. And I didn't even know they were rattles. They were just beings.
They're just, yeah.
And they were definitely alive. I thought they were the ones singing. But yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I feel like with my rattle, I still don't know what, yet to figure that out. But the part outside of the ice and the sound of the ice, but I remember Wilfred saying it is that represents walking in 2 worlds or being in 2 worlds. And for me is like a mixed person that is, how do I bring those worlds together and understand and kind of move between those 2 worlds to do good, hopefully.
Yeah, right. And, I went through all this stuff without thinking that I was part of it. So I had all, my breakdowns and my drug addiction and my, times of depression and whatnot. And that's all on me. I blame myself for being weak and being, not like, why am I just not like the other kids who can just keep their lives together? And I just blame myself. And I didn't hear the words intergenerational trauma until I was, 10 years into my career at university. And yeah. And so you've probably heard other people say this, or I've certainly heard others say it. It's like, as soon as I heard there was a term, I was like, that's it. That's what I got.
That makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah.
And so I started reading about it. And so but I had already gone through a huge process of forgiveness, and that was part of the healing. And that was a very traditional teaching by my elder Maggie Hodgson, who really taught me the real meanings of like gratitude and humility and respect, and in an Indigenous way, and not in a dictionary kind of way, and really what they mean, like physically they mean something, and that fascinated me. That there was a physical analog to these. Very airy, ideas, concepts, right? It's like math come to science, right? And it is, it's not solely math and science that have this kind of connection. It's all of our language. It's all of our culture that makes sense of our physical reality, in some way. And so there are physical correlations with and actions and entire parts of our, everything refers, to family, it refers to food and medicine, it refers, so the big things, right? And you can, in our culture, you can literally point at it. That's the medicine. It's, it's not some airy fairy concept. It's right here. And this is how I made it and where I got it, one of the most fascinating is, where does it come from? Where does the knowledge come from? Right.
Interesting.
So I've always had a sense that the knowledge is new to me, but it's not new to everyone.
I think it's new to a lot of people, like this way of understanding science and that more relational aspect of understanding science, right? The idea of humility, gratitude, and respect is maybe not often connected with science, How do those connect with science?
Well, I think of them as the way to go. That's how you start. An engineer thinking about building something needs a good foundation. It's as a foundational concept. It's basically can't be beat. So, I mean, just imagine you're going into, a new place that you've never been, as some little animal going into a big scary forest. I mean, your best chance of survival is being very humble, like knowing what you can do and what you can't do, and respecting, all these things that you have very little knowledge of around you, and just being grateful, for your next breath, really, for right now. But the gratitude
That's a great way to look at
it.
Yeah.
Honestly, you're just a little ball of humility, respect, and gratitude right there. And but then, so in any situation, what I'm saying, like this, that's as an imagining, but you can do countless thought experiments where you can prove to yourself that this course of, as starting out point for every intended action. Even if you just, fleetingly, pay a little bit of attention to each one. You can't do one thing all the time or you'll never get anything else done. So you can't spend all your time being humble, gracious, and respectful. You've got to actually get something done. But as a foundational principle on where to start and if you form your intentions, and cast your attentions in a way using these as a principle, they're a teaching for a reason, right? I always find that the Indigenous teachings that mean so much to me, or the teachings that come from elders, that are the ones that keep coming up. And I just find I'm like, oh, this is just another part of that teaching. And this is just more like it's incredible how some of these simple teachings are so wide reaching and so fundamental and can just be used in any situation. And so, I mean, obviously good manners, we're taught, as youth in every culture to have good manners, but this is physical manners. So physically, playing your role so that, let's say you are an engineer and your role is to figure out which bolt is going to hold this together. If you don't do that properly, and humbly, so your humility is doing it, the way you were taught and properly, and dotting and crossing where needed, but you don't need a lot of respect. Well, you do. You need respect for the materials, you need respect for the budget, you need respect for your boss, things like that. But those are
maybe not gratitude.
So the gratitude part is kind of, how we talk about, every turns in a cycle, that is sort of the back end of it's kind of your gratitude, that you're going to be grateful for. You should be going into this, you don't know what you're going to get, what you're hoping for, but you're going to get something. Out of anything that you do, any interaction that you have, there's give and take. It's all reciprocal. You're going to get something out of it. And so if you start out humbly and respectfully and with this intention, that what you're going to receive, you're going to receive something. And, in the teachings, everything is a gift. Whether you like it or not, it's a gift. And the idea behind the gift is that you look at it, you take it, you kind of turn it around, you look, you think about it, all your reactions to it, whatnot, take what you can and then give it on, what you understood of it, because that's what makes it a gift. And that's
that responsibility to knowledge you're talking about, right?
And you're not going to keep it. You're not keeping any of it. You showed up with nothing. You're going home with nothing. Okay. You just get to borrow all this stuff for a little while you're here.
Well, you're on this earth, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I just, so as a, honestly, Western modern science is not the furthest thing you can be from humble and respectful and gracious. It is a brute force taking of knowledge without any respect, with zero intention of being respectful or grateful
or reciprocal.
or reciprocal in any way. We're just know what we know. We're going to do what we do, and to hell with everything else. That is sort of the mindset of science. It's like we just must know. We give ourselves the right to know, and we're going to know no matter what, whether it's good or bad. I mean,
like
the good or bad
all
is
the knowledge from everywhere, right?
Exactly. But there's no real intention. That's invariably, technologies are weaponized and, used because to the Western mind, everything is an affront. Everything is fear. It's basically a fearful outlook. You're terrified of losing what you got for one thing and where am I going to get more?
Mm-hmm.
And every single thing that is slightly against you or doesn't go with giving you more and getting more is an affront, and it needs to be dealt with in the sternest and quickest and harshest way, because I will not be deterred. I'm the center of the universe. Nothing else is alive. And I'm just going to take whatever I want, whenever I want, and do whatever the hell I want with it. I know this sounds really bad, and it's not. That's not anyone's intention. I mean, people, all the scientists I've met, and known and loved, this is not what they're like. That is not.
They go into it for
But if it looked at as a whole, that's what it looks like from, say, an Indigenous point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that any of these teachings it's certainly not to scold, and this was made by one of my elders, was told, it's not to scold you. It is literally just to inform you. Like, you're not supposed to take it personally as a personal affront that, that this is the way things are done in modern society. It's not an attack. It's that, well, if you think about it, this other way, you could still get where you're going and add a little bit more to it. It becomes a little stronger, more authentic, and well thought out. So really, and every professional does this. Most professionals are very humble and know what they can do and how to deliver what they're asked to and whatnot. So people truly are humble. They are, play their role. The fact is that we would not know what humility was if we couldn't see what it wasn't. In fact, this is true of everything. The idea of the word measure, and goes back to Emmaus and Surah, which is to compare things, right? Every measurement is a comparison. So you need two things to compare to even make a measurement. And that's what gives things their relativity. I mean, relative to this is how, how many bananas big is that, on Reddit? I mean, so everything is a measurement. Every measurement is a comparison.
Yeah.
And that's how we define things. Like we define things like, well, what do the English call a stove? They call it a cooker. That's what it does. They should call their dogs barkers, but toaster, these simplest kinds of things. Yeah. But all meaning comes from that. Like, we couldn't make anything mean anything without comparing it to other things. So we know love versus, in fact, the opposite of love is not hate. Hate is just different love, but indifference. Now that's very different from love. And I've been told that indifference is the opposite of love. But, this idea that things have an opposite has always fascinated me as well. Does everything have an opposite? Is there an inverse or a reverse? And, you can imagine playing a movie backwards and, things like that, or the laws of physics literally work in both directions. No problem. But the meaning isn't the same going backwards as going forwards.
You made me think there for a second.
Well, what if you forgot that? So that means I'm forgetting my lesson. I'm forgetting who I am. I'm becoming less and, going backwards. It's not a mirror, right? No. Like, you can see the physical things going backwards in time, but how do the mental processes go backwards? How do the emotions go backwards? How does the learning get unlearned? How does information disappear, right? So I think that the humility, respect, and gratitude, just as a core principle, as inseparable entities that are bound up in this relationship, as where elders all over the world and First Nations all over the world talk about this as being the way to go. This is the start. This is how you start everything. And in my life, I've seen things blow up when I don't form my intentions well and don't be respectful, and certainly if you're not gracious or at least polite, everything falls apart. It really is, really quickly. So I take that, it does seem very like a non-physical thing, but I take all of that. There is actually schools of thought that morals really do come from physics. There are things that you shouldn't do physically.
That's interesting. The idea of, you were going back to measurement, what you can measure, and kind of that more standardized, I guess, definition of science, that more modern, maybe global science has maybe more restrictive measurements or definitions that maybe don't as overtly include gratitude, humility, and respect. But would quantum be more of a way to embrace that?
I think quantum, yes. Yes, in fact, it does, because it completely brings your mind to confront ideas that you didn't think were physically possible, and opening your mind in some way to a new way of thinking is always beneficial, especially when it's literally the best physical theory that's ever been proposed. Now, it's a model. It's a model, and all models are wrong, right? We go into things knowing that models are wrong, that we're going to get it wrong. There's no way to get it right because we don't know everything. You're literally bound to screw it up. And your model, no matter, in science, we like Occam's razor. We like to make it as simple as simple as it needs to be and as complex as it needs to be, and no more. You don't want to hang a lot of weirdness on it. It just needs to be this, and that's all it needs. And the simplest explanation, is quite often, closest to the reality. And really, the model, the accurate model is right here in front of us, the world. It's operating perfectly, all the time. And so we model things so that we can predict things, and have theories. And so we have theoretical knowledge and this empirical knowledge just by trying and doing. But there's two other ways of knowing. You can be shown, taught, right? Or, well, you can be taught, let's say, or you can be shown. And I use shown sort of as in, not necessarily parentheses, but shown. I've been shown things, okay? And this is the visionary stuff that I was reading about in Lame Deer, where you're just asking the universe, and you pray about it and you think about it perhaps for years, like I have some of the things, and it comes to you. It comes to you, and it literally came to me, about a number of things. One of my clearest and most recent sort of, and it's not like an epiphany. I've had epiphanies. I've had scientific epiphanies where I've figured out how to solve this problem, and it's like,
aha
wow, it's a huge, like, it's a big relief, and it's a big thing, and it is a big thing. But this ain't that. Okay, this is being shown. You're actually, it's almost like it's being
like presented to you.
Presented to you. It's not like you have a choice either. And you get this all-knowing sense of what's being said in the moment. And in my experience, one of my teachings that came to me in this way is everything is reflection. And it's so simple to say everything is reflection. And then we can kind of think about it, energy is just bouncing around off things, and that's what we measure and see. And so everything really is a reflection. It's just energy reflecting off of energy. And okay, good. So what? But when I was having this, being shown this and being told this, it was an all-knowing, it was like a fundamental truth about reality that, I didn't know, I hadn't really had that thought before or whatever. This wasn't like, daydreaming, coming up with a new idea, like for a story or a book or an art piece or anything. It wasn't like this. Not like it's something else put it there.
Yeah.
And I needed to know this. And it's something that I literally cannot forget. It echoes in my mind and my heart. And in every situation, I'm like, well, what is this reflecting? What am I, what? So that's another way of knowing, being shown things. And so, Hal has talked about it. Many, many elders have talked about, we just get things in dreams. We get things in ceremony. We get gifted with the knowledge that we're seeking. In all of those ceremonial senses, you got to bring your humility, respect, and gratitude in heaps for realsies. Like
for
realsies. Like there's no pretending.
Yeah.
And when you do, you're rewarded. So I've recently, I went to a beaver bundle opening. One of my family members is a beaver bundle keeper, and I went to the opening. It was it's only the second time I've been to that ceremony, and it's an all day, and it's honestly quite the feat to endure. And you see these elders and old men in there just laughing and smiling, sitting on the ground for 9 hours, and I'm like, I gotta get out of here, I'm dying, but but I force, I really push myself to just be just be here now, just do this is what it is. This is ceremony. And the reward afterwards is, I'm not going to get into it, but it was pretty significant. So yeah. And we go there with the full intention of suffering and sacrificing our day and our time and our energy to put into these prayers and these offerings together. And we know we're not doing it alone, and we're all praying together. And it's fantastic. Honestly, I look at ceremony as our highest forms of technology. These are ways of knowing comparable to observatories, modern observatories. They're, specifically oriented with respect to the directions, the cardinal directions. They're specifically built for a specific purpose with, incredibly, intricate and precise instruments inside. And with a very, lifelong knowledgeable person using those instruments to gain knowledge. So they are literally the same thing.
Yeah. And I think that's something that's maybe very new to a lot of people, that, we often say there's a book or a journal article, or you go to a conference to learn something, where these are where you see or you experience something that's more physical, because it's those are tangible, maybe more objective ways that we learn things. But within Indigenous ways of knowing, there's equally as valid, as you were talking about, ways of being shown or gifted knowledges that are significant, as you were saying, that are in dreams, that are in ceremony, that are, like you were saying, visions or showing. We were kind of briefly talked about quantum, and how it reminds me of what Dr. Leroy Littlebear from Kainai Nation said when we got to do Quantum Sandbox. Such a really cool experience. That
it was the experience of a lifetime to work with him. Yes,
I know. It's just, I remember every time sitting down with both of you and just giddy, like, what have I learned today? I couldn't explain half the time or have a conversation, because I was just in awe, and like it was a mic drop every time we had a conversation about quantum. But I think the thing that I really liked about having those conversations about quantum and connecting Indigenous ways of knowing and those very subjective and spiritual ways of being gifted knowledge alongside more objective and standardized ways of understanding science was talking about the emission absorption spectrum and how Leroy described that. I don't know. Did you want to?
Well, I remember too. Yes. I mean, he described a number of things. His treatment of the Higgs boson still gives me shivers.
Right.
But there's the spectra, the emission and absorption spectra. This is a very, very prime and appropriate example of the exchange of energy, right? So gases absorbing, light of a certain wavelength and emitting light of their own. And so absorbing and emitting, right? Like taking and giving. But then also, there's a bandwidth, right? Like we can only, see light waves from 400 to 700 nanometers, for instance. But
Or
many
the
other
radio,
animals,
the FM radio.
right?
I thought that
Or
was a
in the
great
radio,
example.
right? Yeah, the radio is the same thing. Another bandwidth, you can tune your radio to a certain number of frequencies, and the frequencies go on forever in both directions off your dial. But your technology doesn't receive those. So you can build another receiver. Before you have technology, you have your other instruments are your animal friends, your relatives who are around you that can see those things. And hey, why don't you just ask them? You know, and what do you see? Bluer than my blue. You could ask the insects, perhaps,
Yeah.
or what can I see redder than red? That you would ask the moles, for instance. They would tell you heat and ultraviolet, and we sense heat with our skin. I mean, we don't call it sight, but it literally is no different. You're just sensing electromagnetic waves with your skin rather than your retinas, but we don't call it seeing. But so the idea of frequency, wave bands, and spectra, because in quantum everything is a wave. It is waves in an infinite field. It's also where the idea that Leroy has really put some really good flesh to is the idea of the flux, and that this, and he has identified, this is where our thinking connects with quantum measurements and the measurement problem and things like that. So measurements being, I think of them as glints of light off of the flux. And the flux is what's really going on. You can't see the flux. The flux is abstract and multidimensional, but you can take measurements and get, glean some instantaneous knowledge of what the flux was doing at that moment. And then in Western science, we kind of think, well, if we just keep taking enough pictures and build up a picture of what happens in every instance, then we'll know what the flux is. We'll have a picture of the flux. And that's not true. You'll have a bunch of instantaneous measurements, but the flux has already changed. It is now completely different. In fact, you thinking you have this complete picture of the flux is now part of the flux.
So it means everything is always changing all of the time.
All of the time,
ways.
everywhere, in infinite.
And that
not infinite ways, because that would take an infinite amount of time.
But everything is always changing.
Everything's
so that
always
moment
changing.
That you
Literally
take that
everything.
Snapshot,
Yeah.
That's the global Western scientific snapshot of that moment to understand it better, it's already changed.
And what he says about relation, Western science happens when you make a measurement. That's and you can't do science without being able to make a measurement and plot a graph. And clearly that's not true, because we've been doing science for many millennia without any numbers or measurements. Yeah. The idea is that the flux, it can be measured. You can get aspects of it, and you can see, some of the fundamental. So in science, we idealize everything down into, assume it's spherical, and get rid of all the rough edges, and just ideally what would happen. And we're still interested in the relationship, right? When we're colliding particles or bricks or whatever, cars, we're interested in the relationship. What is this going to do to this when this happens? But the relationship that Leroy is talking about is a real relationship. Like when you have a relationship with your dog or your family members or your friends or your lovers, that's a relationship. It's your body, it's your mind. You think about them all the time. It's your heart, it's your, your emotional centers, and it's your spiritual energy. It's what, gets you up in the morning. It's what keeps you going to work. It's what keeps you happy. It's your energy.
So much more depth than just
That's right. And so a real measurement is having a relationship. I mean, you're just constantly taking measurement. When you're in a relationship with somebody, you're always watching for their moods and their ideas of what they thought of that, even unspoken things and whatnot. So that's a relationship. That's science. That's us doing science. That's how our science goes. The wave and frequency thing, there's no way of overstating how close that is to a lot of what has been called by a non-Indigenous physicist. F. David Peat wrote a book called Blackfoot Physics.
Blackfoot Physics, yeah.
And I love to use that term because it does sort of differentiate between this relationship that the Western scientists are looking for and the actual relationship that we're talking about. They're not the same, but They're after the same truth. This is the thing. They're after the same truth. And the best theory so far is quantum theory. And it is, even most elders who hear it, would say, yeah, I mean, they're kind of on it. In fact, the most important part of it that seems very, very like our knowledge and ways of knowing is the non-locality part, where the information can be in multiple places. And this is like the idea of number that we were talking about before, where number is not a concrete thing at all. It's airy-fairy, it's everywhere. It's just a concept.
Yeah.
And so knowledge can be like that. And so why can't it just be here instead of somewhere else? But forming the relationship to get that information there is the science that you do. And so you go out and you seek it, you form your intention, you cast your attentions. And I'm firmly convinced that's all we are. That's all we have. Everything else is irrelevant, essentially. Everything can be reduced to intention and attention. That's all you got. And you balance it out. If you spend all your time forming intention, you'll never do anything because you're not paying attention. But if you spend all your time paying attention, you can't come up with ideas and new things to do. So you need to balance this all the time. And and with respect to each thing. And so that intention and attention, if you think of yourself as, well, I'm a spirit. Well, the spirit, in our teachings, we're gifted with this spirit that has choice. Rocks don't make mistakes. No rock has ever made a single mistake ever and never will. They're not allowed to because they don't have choice. So, we have this power to choose, and the only things that we have to choose with are our intention and attention. You just, you're just given an audible question, and you're just this free-floating mind. Like you can pay attention to parts of it and not other parts, and you can form an intention. But you don't need a body. You don't need anything. You're just intention and attention, and you can do that emotionally. You can do it mentally. You can do it physically, and you can do it spiritually.
You made me think there about something that Willie Ermine said about how there are all these different worlds that are on different levels, and that our thoughts are on a different level, and like that mental level, and there's that spiritual level. Is that quantum? Would that be quantum?
Well, sort of
connected. Sort of.
It is, because the fundamental forces of nature, of which there are 3, not 4, like you've been told. Gravity is not a force. Gravity is an effect. But the 3, the strong nuclear force, the weak nuclear force, and the electromagnetic force, these are they're really similar. They have, attractive and repulsive parts, and they have, different ranges. So they are really on different scales. So the strong nuclear force, keeps quarks together in the proton. But what keeps a bunch of protons together and not, fissioning into parts is the weak nuclear force holding the nucleus together. And then the electromagnetic force is how everything interacts with everything else. Gravity is just there to guide it along the way. It doesn't seem to me, and particle physicists, well, they talk about this graviton, the particle of gravity, as if, gravity could be quantized. And this is not seen anywhere. Nobody's found the graviton. Nobody's even proposing experiments to find the graviton. But they just, because everything else is quantum, they assume that this must be quantum. And it may well be, but it may be that part of the universe that is infinitely differentiable, that is infinitely smooth and cannot be broken down. And, gravity, and these forces, like you say, on different levels, right? So we know that electrons are, a disturbance in the electromagnetic field. But there's a field for everything. Every fundamental particle has its own field, and some fields do not interact with others. And, some particles interact with some fields, but not others. And so some people, interact with music and not sports, or some people, interact with these things and things that excite you. That's you're an element of that kind, that kind of thing excites you. And, you absorb sports and you emit sports and you're all about sports, or you're totally, absorbing music or emitting music, or all about music, and I really say like humans really are like quantum processors. They're the quantum particles almost. Like I think of people as like molecules. And I really think that, we think of, certainly in hardcore quantum physics, the quantum processes truly are happening at very, very tiny scales. And that, of course, is true with the physical energy of these small little things. But there's no thing that says that emotional stuff isn't quantum, and emotion, we know it's bigger than the body. When people enter a room and you can feel their depression, or you can feel their love, or you can feel their happiness, emotion, we're bigger than our body. We're these big fields. And so just reading a paper yesterday about, neuroscience, they're always measuring a brain, or taking, asking it a question. They're just measuring one person. But now they're putting, two people together, and they're imaging both their brains at the same time, and they're watching them synchronize. The brain frequencies synchronize just because they're interacting. And of course, I mean, this shouldn't be surprising at all. Like people that, the way to win friends and influence people is to be like them. And is to smile a lot and sympathize with everything they're saying, and then they'll like you, and then you can make them do things.
Like the was it the Toastmasters and some Dale Carnegie references. Great.
But these are all ways of knowing, and Western science really only pays attention to physical ways of knowing and mental ways of knowing, and that's great. That's half the universe. You got half the battle there. The rest,
balance.
Is right. You're going to be whack out of balance when you get, hit with an emotional problem that you have no idea what you're doing, and it can cast you just completely off the rails.
Yeah, and that's right. Like there is such.
But why not have a science of emotion, or a science of spirit? And this is what ceremony is.
Science.
Just take care of all of it all at once.
You know what? Can I ask you one more question? But we log back in.
Yeah.
We have 4 minutes. Okay. And then I think we should do a second part, because they do have AI questions that
I want to talk AI.
I know.
Totally want to talk AI.
Because it is 8:46. We don't have a lot of time, but there's one more question I want to ask that I don't want to rush in 4 minutes. Do you think quantum can allow for a better understanding of Indigenous science or Indigenous ways of knowing?
Absolutely. I mean, that's how I came to it. Honestly, it was my understanding of the standard model, particle physics, and cosmology, and quantum theory, that like I said, those two books, they were like in two different directions, like the visionary, shamanism type idea of seeing the world and getting knowledge, and then the quantum, hardest core science you can do. It really, and that's the way I went. That's, I got pulled off and did astrophysics, but I needed it. If I hadn't done that, I wouldn't be back in this circle. I'm not a person given to belief. Belief is an abhorrent thing to me. Belief is like, let's pretend. It's childish, and it's irrelevant. It's like your opinion, and that ain't the truth. We go into it knowing that your opinion is not the truth. The truth is yet to be found, or perhaps, but it certainly isn't your opinion. And I know that going in, or my opinion for that matter. So I really took it to heart. I did go through an atheist phase after university, and thinking that science is it. This is it. There's no spiritual woo-woo, nothing. But
there's quantum woo-woo.
There was quantum woo-woo, right? So, but it really has helped me to, because I was having these experiences in ceremony, which I couldn't explain. And that bothered me. I told you, things that I can't explain seriously bother me, like physically depress me, like will take me out. if I can't figure them out or make it work somehow. And I had a lot of things that weren't working in my life. When I first told my mom that I'd found my birth family, and she said, "Well, I think this will make you a more integrated person, Rob." And I was just, I was so angry. I didn't say anything to her at the time. I was really offended, and I thought this was a huge affront because, good God, Mom, like I'm an astrophysicist with these discoveries, on a mortgage and a raised family. I think I'm a pretty well integrated person for what I've gone through. And of course she was right. She mostly is. She's a lot like Maggie in that way, and she's quite prophetically brilliant. And so she was right. It has made me a more integrated person. But but integrated is the idea. I had to add up all these things. That's what integration is adding everything together and integrating. My heritage and my culture and knowledge in an Indigenous way, and these experiences that I was having that I had no other way of explaining. Okay. So when you have a vision in ceremony and you're a hardcore physicist, I mean, you're like the guy who saw a UFO, right? It's like, who's going to believe me? And I finally realized it literally doesn't matter who believes me. It doesn't matter if anyone believes me, because I don't have any belief. Okay. I have no need for belief. What I replace it with and what I have instead is experience and knowledge. And those are going to trump belief every day of the week. Okay. If you have experience and your experiential knowledge of something, you have no reason or need for belief whatsoever, or faith, whatever you want to call it. But experience and knowledge are so real. They may not be the same as somebody else's. And when we're in ceremony, a spirit can come in the lodge and they're going to have a different message for everyone. They're going to look like something else to everyone. And, in physics, I'm reminded of an article. It was called The One Electron Universe. And this gets down into some pretty esoteric field theory stuff, but because electrons, you literally cannot tell them apart. There might as well only be one that's, say, a multi-dimensional electron that just happens to be wherever you need it to be, whenever it needs to be, because it's, in a much higher dimension, say a 10-dimensional universe rather than a 3.
Yeah.
So a 10-dimensional electron will take care of every electron we're ever going to need in our 3 dimensions, and then some. So the one electron universe, this idea that a spirit, can appear differently to each participant in a ceremony and have a different message for each one. Some people say, well, many spirits came in, or whatever you need to do to make it work in your head.
Yeah.
But as my elders teach me, it's just, it's usually 1 or 2 or 3 grandfathers that come in. It's not hundreds.
Ooh, but it's a heck of a lodge.
Maybe. I mean,
Ooh, I don't know.
They are, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of pipes. It's a big smoke.
That's a lot of pipes.
But the idea, so it helped me come to my understanding of my culture, and that has served me so well. And I often look back at my physical education in physics as it's a nice core. It's a nice, that's the body part of it. And then all the thinking and the ways to think and critical thinking and making arguments and improving things, that's the mental part. That's half the universe. The rest is yet to be integrated into that. And so my journey into my culture and back into my heritage, my family, really is that the emotional and spiritual part that I've been missing my whole life. And I always thought of this as basically bullshit for one thing. And for another, it wasn't going to make any sense. No rational sense, for God's sake, for sure. I mean, it's just chaotic woo-woo BS anyway. And it ain't like that. Let me tell you, it makes really good sense. And it's really strong. It's really powerful. It's just as powerful as any kind of physical knowledge or technology. Is being able to have emotional and spiritual technologies and knowledge that also overcome yet greater problems
Yeah. Yeah. And if you only have, you think if you're only learning the mental and physical ways of knowing, what are you missing out when you're not
Yeah.
looking at, that's one side, right? That's one side of the mask. And the other side, what are we missing? That imbalance of that emotional
Right.
and that spiritual.
And
Really
I've
knowing
always taken it
just
to
only
heart
half the
to be
truth.
exactly to be a
Yeah.
physicist, you need to be open to all of it. You don't just
Mhm.
take the part, and closing your mind, completely to anything like being an atheist or closing your mind to anything is a very non-scientific thing to do.
Yeah.
If you're truly after the truth, you got to be open to pretty much everything. I really see the value in our Academy of Science that has been built up in the West.
Mhm.
It is truly amazing in its own right, and I mean I'm very very fond of it. But coming to when you're young in it, when you're a novice, and you think it is everything, and then to find out that it isn't. It's a growing up, it's a
Yeah.
maturing that you
Uh-huh.
realize that your dog ain't gonna last forever.
Yeah.
Your parents are gonna last forever, and nothing's gonna last forever. You know, and these are maturing, a maturing person, and so I could say I really do have no regrets, although I had many regrettable situations and whatnot, but I don't regret them.
Yeah.
And I've forgiven myself for all my, previous non-scientific ways. I feel that I'm a much more integrated and fuller scientific mind now than I
Mhm.
have ever been. And of course I'm not doing, research science in physics anymore or astrophysics as a job. I'm doing it with people in my nation, my relations, like my relatives. And
Which is like real work. I feel,
yeah,
you think
it's
of
wonderful. It's
often
so
the work that you do and, the research work is, let's be honest, how many people really get to read or understand that work. And when you're in community and you're doing the work every day with humans, that's making massive impact on a daily basis, right?
yeah, exactly. And it's just I was given a gift, and now I'm just trying to keep it as a gift, just giving it on. And that's the teaching that I
That
received.
reciprocity.
The
Yeah.
reciprocity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a good full circle we did there.
It was. That
Yeah.
was pretty
Yeah.
good to
That was
come up
good.
that at the end. That was nice. That was nice.
um,
So, but yeah, if I would love to do the AI thing, that it almost deserves its own hour,
well,
really.
I think this is a stay tuned because
Yeah.
it's interesting. I know we've had conversations right when I think we went for lunch, right when Chat GPT just kind of came out, and thinking about that and thinking about how that affects, I don't know, how that affects time and cycles and quantum and indigenous science. I think there's a lot to talk about there that I think deserves a part two. So I think that's a stay tuned for part two.
It really does, because this is actually, this is an existential threat confronting humanity, and this is where you need spiritual guidance.
Mm-hmm.
And 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 it's one of the few times that that I'm actually afraid. It's one of the few things that actually makes me afraid for humanity.
Mm-hmm.
If nukes didn't do it for me in the 70s, and 80s, whatnot,
What else
um,
is next?
or asteroids hitting the Earth, or comets, or the solar flares, you know,
Oh,
there's
you probably
plenty to,
thought about that a lot,
there's
hey?
plenty of things to be
Mm-hmm.
existentially fearful of, and none of them, bother me at all. Not even climate change. I'm serious. This is a huge opportunity, um,
I think that
for
the
people
time
to.
scale and how it's changing so quickly and
Well, if you wanted to know
exponentially.
how to teach 7 billion people all at once where they went wrong and what they're doing wrong, this is about the perfect way to do it. Just show
Oh
them.
gosh.
Just show them.
Oh.
And, because that's natural. That this is the natural outcome of,
Mm-hmm.
of an imbalance like this. And I
There you
don't think
go.
that's regrettable. I mean, it's a way of knowing. I mean,
It is a
this
way
is
of
this
knowing.
is we're living through, an actual scientific experiment that is going to teach a lot of people a lot of things. And it ain't going to be us. It's going to be, people after
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
So,
No.
I mean, I shudder to think of what they're going to say about us. How horrible. We must be monsters in their history books. I'm talking about future history books.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're the
Yeah,
monsters, and
absolutely.
we're the Nazis. We're the ones who
No.
did this. So,
Yeah. But I think definitely deserves a conversation because
totally.
I'm curious on your thoughts and yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Rob, always a pleasure.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the opportunity, for asking me. It's a big honor. And I love the responsibility. That's the thing that makes the honor good now.
There you go. Responsibility, the reciprocity, or giving back. So stay tuned for episode 2, part 2 of whatever. This is episode 4 with Rob Cardinal. Okay, Rob.
All right.
Take care. So much.
Yeah, we'll talk super soon. Right?
Hi. Hand to heart for listening. Thank you so much. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like, comment, subscribe, leave a review. I don't know what else there is, but you can do it and we appreciate it. We love it. Again, there's some really cool, awesome Indigenous science merch. Link in the show notes or go to relationalsciencecircle.com/shop. Again, the profits go towards elder honoraria, supporting knowledge keepers, editing. Thank you, Email Starlight, and just keeping the podcast going so we can keep having really cool conversations and having fun and learning about Indigenous science. Also, thanks to Blue Marble Space, Institute of Science, and Cosmic Deer Dancer for their support and sponsorship. So there's no word for goodbye in Cree, so we say see you again. Kito Mina. Have a lovely, wonderful day. Hi.